What if there was a legit space between for sale and for rent in a rent to own marketplace where it was legal, fair, and transparent? That's what we're doing here at Zegacy is we are creating and connecting home buyers and investors in a legal, fair, and transparent manner in a industry that has often got a bad rap, rightfully so, because of bad practices, legal uncompliance, tenants losing money, properties not meeting conditions. So when you're looking at the spectrum of home ownership control, you can see that in a rental on the left side, there's basically no control. And on the right side, if you're buying with a bank loan or all cash, you're on title. There's the middle ground, a land contract, or often called a contract for deed. And then there is what we deem the rent to own space, which is a lease option or a lease purchase. So what we are going to look at here is the best and the worst of rent to own homes. So at their best, for tenant home buyers, they have a path to home ownership. They get to try before they buy, and you get the opportunity to build equity, either in the form of rent credits or locking in a purchase price and getting any appreciation above and beyond that. For real estate investors, why they like this is predictable rental income. They have a broader buyer pool along with more committed buyers, and there's the potential for higher returns. The worst of rent to own homes for the tenant buyers is that the rent is higher than traditional market rent. There's hidden fees, there's complex terms, and then there's the risk of losing any option fee or down payment. For real estate investors, they're unsure if the tenant's going to buy the home, if they're going to treat the home well. There's the legal complexities of the space between a rental and a mortgage and making sure that they navigate that and follow the state and city compliances. And then there's the vacancy risk. If the tenant decides that they don't want to buy the house or they want to leave, the tenant has to then think, okay, what am I doing with this asset? So we're going to look at an example $300,000 house in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,800 square feet. So if I was a tenant, so we're going over here to our handy calculator, and let's say that it was a $299,000 home. If I'm a tenant, I want to put, let's say, 1% down, and I want to rent this for maybe $2,000 a month. If I was a tenant, this is what I would want. What this is calculating is the investor's pro forma based on them getting financing. It is picking the right or paying property taxes and insurance because the investor is responsible for that. So if you assume that the investor is getting some financing, if you're assuming that they're paying property taxes, they're paying homeowners insurance, on the property, they have some ongoing maintenance expenses, and they're giving the tenant $200 a month in rent credits. Here is what the investor is seeing. So the investor is saying, hey, I'm going to put down roughly $77,000. I'm going to lose roughly $500 a month. But if the tenant purchases the home and they buy back the home at a certain agreed upon price, so this is a 9% buyback price. So you add 9% to the 300,000. So they're buying it for 318,000. Now, if I was a tenant, I would maybe only want this to be 4% for a buyback. So the investor is buying it for 300. The tenant gets to buy it for $312,000 anytime in the first 18 months. So again, you look at that, and in this case, the investor would lose money in this transaction. So clearly a highly favorable tenant, perspective. Now, on the same case, an investor might say, hey, I want 10% down and I want $3,000 a month in rent, and I want the buyback price to be, let's say, 9% and 13% at 18 and 60 and 36 months. So now we look at this and we say, okay, it looks like the investor is cash flowing now on this property, roughly a 9%. And then if the tenant chooses to buy back the home, there is a good annualized ROI. So you can kind of see how on a example $300,000 home, you can play with our calculator. You can go through some different scenarios on what exactly this looks like. There's a few other pieces here, which is what's the probability that the tenant actually buys the home? So for the investor, even though there's the pro forma, which is basically the potential profit, if the tenant bought the home at either 12 months, 24 months, or 48 months, you can kind of see some annualized returns that the investor is looking at. But there's also the scenario that what if the tenant leaves? So let's say that the tenant leaves, the home has appreciated at 4%, but they got to now, the investor has to sell the house. Maybe they have to put in $11,000 or $5,000 in repairs. So you can see what the investor's return on their investment is, assuming if the tenant leaves. So as an investor, of course, it'd be great if the tenant bought at these different prices, but from the investor, they're looking at you may buy or you might leave. And then the investor has to consider those various factors on what the home's worth, how much it costs to sell, do they have to fix up the home, and then we've just added some probabilities for these different scenarios based on our past data experience. So hopefully this is helpful as both the tenants and the investors are looking for, how to make this a safe and comparable way going back and forth between two parties. Thanks.